With the advent of digital technology, the LMH company decided to create a state-of-the-art archival copy of the original film.
In the past, archival efforts resulted in damage to the film. Twice before, in running it through gates for 8mm film, it's been damaged. Now we have a way of copying the images and reproducing them in a way that we don't have to run it through a gate, and it can be accurately reassembled, and the information can be provided without the risk of damage.
When the decision was made to go ahead on the project, Silverberg contacted Joe Barabee, Director of Scientific Imaging at McCrone Associates in Westmont, Illinois.
He identified himself as being a representative of the Zapruder family, of the Zapruder estate, and that they were interested in having this film blown up frame by frame, magnified, to reconstruct a videotape from that. Probably more than anything, the area in which I specialize is photomacrography. It's sort of a cross between microscopy and standard photography, and there are many problems that have to be solved in that range. And that's exactly what this project entailed.
Barabee gathered the equipment he needed and shipped it to National Archives 2 in College Park, Maryland, where the shoot would take place. From the first day of preparations, MPI Teleproductions was present to record the process. The lens used was a Zeiss Luminar 40 with an f/4.5 and 12 times magnification. The film was Kodak 6121, a transparency duplicating film in the 4x5-inch format. Besides choosing equipment, Barabee had to create a system to transport the film through the camera. While this system had to allow him to work quickly, it also needed to be archivally sound, especially in terms of chemicals and the film's physical safety. A simple construction was also key. Barabee and his assistants built a transport system that would hold the entire length of the 25-foot film.
The film is stored at the U.S. National Archives at College Park in a temperature and humidity controlled vault at 25 degrees Fahrenheit and 30% relative humidity. The process for taking the film out is to move it from that 25-degree environment into a 50-degree environment for about 24 hours so that the film can warm up a bit, not be brittle, and if there's going to be any condensation, that condensation will be on the outside of the film can that the film is stored in, or the plastic bag in which the film is actually placed.
Polyester sleeves held the film in place and protected it as it moved toward the camera. Beneath the camera, the sleeve would be removed and the photograph taken. Final calibrations of the camera setup were necessary before the shooting could begin.
When you have approximately 500 photographs, individual photographs, you want a high degree of consistency from one photograph to the next. So any variable that you can eliminate, that you can get under control, you want to. So we used film of all one emulsion number. We used one bulb throughout, which was of concern because this is a large number of photographs to make with one bulb. So we had 3 bulbs tested. Exposure had to be absolutely consistent, and color balance had to be absolutely consistent. I used a photographic timer, which would give me very precise timing of the exposure.
Each frame of the film was enlarged and reproduced on the 4x5 format, and the entire frame of the film was reproduced from film edge to film edge, including all information between the sprocket holes.
The film frame is fairly standard. It's sort of 4 units wide and 3 units high. It's kind of a rectangle. But it was not uncommon for 8mm cameras, and perhaps some 16mm cameras, to shoot some additional image between the perforations, between the sprocket holes.
I think there have been instances where there's been a question as to what's between sprocket holes, what the sprocket hole information is, or there's a need to examine a break in the film or something like that. One of the reasons for doing what we've done in making the reproductions of each of the frames in a 4x5 format is to reproduce the sprocket hole information and to reproduce the break information so that that can be analyzed by anybody who needs to look at it.
In processing, The same care had to be taken with the exposed transparencies.
At the beginning of the project, when they first came into town with their camera and their enlarger head, it was necessary for us to balance their film to our processor. So the first thing we did was run a series of tests to balance the enlarger to our machine.
Once the photography began at the archives, the exposed film came quickly to the processing plant.
As the film comes in, it goes straight back and straight onto the machine. The quantity of film has been so great that it's really been a non-stop process. Once the film is dry, after it has gone through the chemical process, it is then pulled out of the machine and unclipped from the rack that it has gone through it on. As the film comes off, it is inspected for defects or flaws, problems that they may have had within the shoot itself for dust or for curl of the film. From there, it is able to be sorted depending on the frame number and sleeved within individual sleeves and put into a binder. At that point, it then goes back to the archives for inspection by the people who shot it.
With the processing finished, the set of the Zapruder film's still frames was complete in transparency format. Then, using state-of-the-art digital technology, those still frames were returned to a motion picture format.
We had to take what would be the equivalent of someone taking a regular still camera and being able to shoot it at 18 frames a second and put that back together into an image sequence.
The first step in the reanimation process was to scan the individual transparencies into the computer.
We scan in each image individually, and we have an image sequence of approximately 480 frames that we have to put back into a sequence so that it moves again. We scan these at much higher resolution, up to 1500 dots per inch resolution, so that we could blow up the footage and have enough image on the outside of the area to motion track everything.
Once all the transparencies had been scanned, each of the individual pictures were registered to one another. That is, the images were lined up perfectly using the sprocket holes and frame edges as reference points. Registration is essential for seamless motion when the frames are animated back into a moving sequence.
Well, once we stabilized all the footage and made sure everything registered very well, then we took another pass, a finer registration or a motion stabilization pass that stabilized the original camera jitter to get rid of any motion that may have been an artifact of handheld cameras. We're able to go inside the actual image and look for areas of contrast to stabilize the picture within that environment.
Using the digital tools available today, the technicians brought out as many details as possible from the original optical print.
The camera goes through many different angles, and there are different levels of exposure that the camera wasn't able to correct, and there were some dark areas towards the end where we were able to get more out of the film, and to ramp those levels up and down as the camera passed through the sequence, which I think looks a lot better than the original footage, and it was non-destructive.
Most of the dust and scratches on the original film were removed. The frames around the splices, however, were so damaged they were impossible to restore without adding digital artifacts to the image. In the final sequence, those traces of the damage are left intact. Next, the various versions of the film are sequenced on the computer.
Then I do this process, what we call rendering, which all that really is it resequences the individual images into an image sequence that we are able to play in real time for 18 frames a second of our production for television.
At this final step in the process, this new motion picture footage is archived in its original resolution, and in this digital format will always reproduce without any image degradation.